Hey, this is Benjamin Boyce, and I'm going to present you somebody who identifies as Esther OReilly. We speak about Christianity and her idea that Jordan Peterson is a gateway not to the alt-right, but to a return to Christianity for people who grew up in the church and didn't feel a connection to it. She thinks that Jordan Peterson is providing means for Christianity to become meaningful to people who've fallen out of that faith. I challenge her in a way that probably not a lot of other people would challenge her. I just don't think she's radical enough. Anyways, this is what you're going to get this time. I know it's a little different than normal, but I think there's something fruitful here. Here you go. Why would you say that you're a conservative Christian? What's the foundation for that and your relationship to the world? Like, you believe in the literal truth of the Bible or in a formal form of interpretation of that literal truth?
Yeah, I do take the Bible literally, but I think there are good reasons to do so. And you know, we can get into this, but that was something that fascinated me so much about the debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, which was that Sam kept trying to come back over and over again to like, well, yeah, but I know, Jordan, when you talk about God, you know, you're saying, well, God is the manifestation of the whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I'm talking about the people who believe that God is a literal figure who created the world and answers prayers and stuff. And I think people get confused, you know.
So there is a reality to God that isn't in a Petersonian framework is this abstract goal above all goals. Peterson does a lot of apologetics to make it make sense to people who don't take it literally. But I don't get the sense that he's had a personal experience of the divine, but maybe he does, but he always dresses it up in psychedelic talk.
Well, and I mean, he's been open about his experimentation with psychedelics in the past, so no doubt that's playing a role here. No, I mean, Peterson's own religious background was United Church of Canada, I think, which is, you know, one of these mainline denominations, and you know, it's very run through the motions Christianity. You know, it's not a denomination that really encourages a holistic Christian worldview or encourages a deep study of Scripture or like, let's understand why we believe what we believe. Let's talk about having a relationship with God. It's like, oh, well, we just go to church because you go to church. That's what people do. So it completely makes sense to me that he would just drift from that and feel like there was no there. So, you know, I see him as, I don't want to call him an atheist because I think he is genuinely open to, he does leave the door open metaphysically. So open agnostic probably would best describe him. And he definitely presents as more open to new ideas than somebody like Harris or the new atheists. Because they're like, you know, we've been there, done that, won the argument, never mind, moving on. And Peterson's like, well, I mean, I don't know. What the hell do you know? You know, that's his big shtick, you know. But at the same time,
in your article, you say that, I'm going to totally put words onto your article, but it seems like you want to position Peterson as a gateway, not to the alt-right, but to Christianity or to a spiritual relationship with a living God. That's what it seems like you were trying to say.
Yes, well, and he's been that gateway. I mean, I have data on this. I have a friend in England who's an evangelist, like a Christian evangelist, and he said everywhere he's gone in the year 2018, he's encountered people, mostly younger guys, who are suddenly interested in Christianity and in coming to church as a direct result of Peterson. And then, you know, because he's in turn friendly to Peterson and he gets Peterson, he can connect with them instead of being like, oh, well, I don't really know who Peterson is. That's kind of weird. You know, he's like, ooh, cool. Let's have a talk about this. So the gateway to the alt-right stuff, I mean, that's ridiculous. Exactly. I know. But to many people, it's not. And I had this debate with a humanist clergyman named James Croft. And, you know, the first third or so of the broadcast was him trying to insist that Peterson is a gateway drug to the alt-right, and me saying, no, he's not. Can we please move on and talk about something more interesting? Which we did. Fortunately, people can go listen to that if they like.
But how would he be a gateway to Christianity then?
Well, because he takes the Bible seriously. Even though he's cautious about, he doesn't want to. He still wants to kind of remain above it all in a literal sense. He doesn't want to make a commitment because that would require a lot more study on his part. He sees the Bible as a reflection of deep realities about human nature. And so when he talks about things like sin and repentance and the fear of God, there's, remarkable clip about the fear of God and about how you never get away with anything in this life. And if you twist the fabric of reality, it'll snap back at you. That's profound stuff. And he connects that to the biblical stories in a way that a lot of people have never heard before. And it's fresh for them. It's new for them.
Was it new for you when you happened upon his biblical lectures, or you're like, oh yeah?
Well, no, because I was very blessed to grow up in a very intellectually rich, grounded Christian upbringing where a lot of the points he made, like about Jacob and Esau, I thought that's how I've thought of that story too.
What was the point that he made? Just so.
Oh, well, he's just talking about the character of Jacob, that he's this trickster figure and he's pulling a fast one on his brother. And then after all these years have gone by and he sees Esau coming and he thinks, oh, shit, Esau's going to be so mad at me. And so he's like, send animals and stuff on ahead to let him know that I really don't want him to be mad at me, that he comes and he's bowing. He's like, I'm sorry, I was such a jerk. Please forgive me. And Esau's like, you son of a bitch. It's okay. Come here, man. He gives him a hug. It's okay, little kid brother. So, he makes that vivid. He makes it come alive. He's such a gifted communicator, Yeah. And whereas before it was just, oh, yeah, these boring old, things, the coloring pages in my Sunday school book or whatever, and it just went like this.
Yes.
And now it's like, oh, wow, it's just coming alive for people in a fresh way.
But even though he takes the Bible seriously, he still takes it figuratively, whereas you would say you take it literally.
Yeah,
and
I do.
I'm sure you, even in that, you probably don't take everything literally. Like 7 days and 6,000 years ago, like that?
Correct. I do. Yeah, that's too narrow of a reading, and we could get into that a little bit as well. But I think Peterson, in a sense, Peterson's phenomenon, his success, is a reflection of some things I don't think the church has done very well. And what one aspect of that is a very, very narrow focus on you have to interpret this bit of the Bible in this one particular way, or else, like, if you pull on this thread, the whole thing will come tumbling down and you can't believe anything anymore. That's been really damaging, I think, especially to young people.
Yeah, there's this one growing up Christian, and then even to this day, I'm still kind of not peeved, but kind of annoyed by the whole contradiction argument. Like, the Bible's full of contradictions. I don't really find that necessarily a plausible way to denigrate what the Bible's showing. I'm like, the Bible's full of connections, and the connections is the active work of, like, interacting with this text and then interpreting this ancient text into your modern life. The contradiction, it's not a logical document, and to read it like that is a fundamental error.
Well, I think I'm also peeved with that argument, but I think what I would say about that argument is that very often it's just based on laziness. And so the kinds of things that will be presented as contradictions are, like, not actually contradictions when you look at it. So the fact that people can have more than one name, the fact that the same person could be, the fact that different people could have the same name, or, it's just laziness. If you look at this chart that Harris likes to use, that's where a lot of those come from,
Yeah. But even though it's not a logical document, you still need some sort of rules of engagement with it in order not to take it wrong, because there's just as many wrong ways to take, probably even more wrong ways to take the Bible as there are, or than there are, right ways to take the Bible. You need to engage with it in a specific manner. And I would think that there's certain principles that you base it on. And Peterson's pretty close to those central principles. Like, this is a document that's teaching us realities about being a human being in this world.
Well, I don't know that I would agree necessarily that it's not a logical document. I do think we have good evidence about its provenance and its historicity, particularly in the case of the New Testament, where we're closer than we are to the Old Testament. Now, I mean, there are bits of it. Like, to give one example, I don't think that the Book of Job is intended to be historical. That it has characteristics to me of being a myth. So I kind of view the Book of Job the way Peterson views the whole Bible, pretty much, or at least the Old Testament. But I would diverge from him at that. I mean, I think King David was a historical character. I think King Hezekiah was historical. And I do, in fact, when I look at the preponderance of evidence, I do, in fact, believe that there is a literal God who did literally reveal himself, in particular to the Jews. And then moving into the New Testament, I think that Christ was actually God on earth and did the things recorded about him. But that's a cumulative case. And this is where I actually appreciated what Sam Harris was saying in his debate with Peterson. He said, so are you implying that that stupid people need their myths? Because we, people who are rational, we kind of know this isn't literally true, like you can't take it literally, but there are people who need to, or else their house of cards will fall down. They won't have a compass to guide them through life, because that seems kind of patronizing in that case. And I thought that point stung. I thought there was something to that. Clearly, I'm not a fan of Sam Harris, but there were things he said at that debate that I think were important, because he was trying to sort of get at this. Well, yes, Santa Claus, for example, Santa Claus is an archetypal kind of figure. So in that sense, we could say Santa Claus is real, air quotes around real. But, when we become men, we put away childish things, right? As it says in the Bible. And we stop playing pretend. And so the Peterson is like, but do we though? And he wants to kind of do this psychological, he's got his grand unifying theory, I like to call it. And that's all well and good, but Harris is like, yeah, but what are we actually talking about here? Let's get clear. Let's be clear about this.
But do you think that, like, it's a literal interpretation of the Bible if one does not believe in Jesus Christ, that they will never know heaven?
Well, I mean, that's an incredibly broad, that they will never know heaven. That's not something that I can say with any certainty, because I don't know the final destiny of anybody's soul. So, if you're thinking about, let's say, some guy in a tribal island who never reads the Bible or hears about Jesus or whatever, is he just gonna go straight to hell when he dies? I'm not gonna say that. That would be silly. I do think though that we will encounter Christ in a literal personal fashion at some point, and it may only be after a person dies that he encounters Christ. But I do think that Christ is the way to God, and that he is life, and that you need to come to know him in order to fulfill what I think is the final purpose of man.
Yeah, but what does that mean? What does Christ mean? What is that a figure of?
Well, I believe Christ is a person. I don't just believe that he's the archetypal perfect man or whatever.
But is he the same sort of person as you and I are right now? I mean, you can't have a Skype with Christ.
No, although I do believe he has a body, because he became incarnate.
Hmm.
But no, I can't Skype with him. And this is the thing. I remember I was kind of talking past an acquaintance of mine a while back, because he was kind of trying to get his head around my belief that God is literally real, and that Christ is literally real. And he said, but I mean, if you climbed a mountain, you don't believe you would get closer to God, right? Like you don't think that going into outer space would bring you physically closer. So how can you believe that God is literally real then? And I said, well, I mean, it doesn't. It's not like that. I believe that there's something outside of nature. I don't believe nature is a closed system, and I think that's really what gets to the heart of it. So no, I don't believe that I can empirically access God right now at the moment. I mean, not unless he chose to. Some people think that still happens. I'm skeptical about that. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe he has a literal existence. And even in science, we intuit the existence of things that we can't empirically access all the time, like a black hole, for example. No one's ever seen a black hole, but we look at the effects that it has on things around it. We look at how it bends light and whatnot, and we sort of reason our way to the existence of something like a black hole. And I think that's the way it is with God.
Well, but how do you reason your way into a relationship with a person? If Christ is a person, and not a personification of traits, but an actual literal person who you cannot have empirical knowledge of, how do you form a relationship with this non-person, this person that you can't have a personal relationship with in the same way that you have a personal relationship with another living human being?
Well, I look at the moment in space and time where he did, I believe, manifest himself in a very empirical, nitty-gritty, tangible way to a group of people in first century Palestine. And I look at the record that they left behind, and I use various techniques to see if it seems like they were up close to the facts. And I think like a good Bayesian, as Coleman Hughes said at the wake of the Kavanaugh trials, I think about, okay, well, what would be more probable than not? Would we expect to see this body of data and evidence if this were not true? Would we expect to see it if it were true? What does that ratio look like? And so that leads me to conclude that even though I can't see Christ now, Christ did make himself real, and he left behind a record and a witness of who he was. And so that now he is a person with whom I can communicate, and he will hear me, even though at the moment there's that space-time barrier between me and him. But I can use that as evidence to my belief that he's literally existing now.
Yeah, but so it's an indirect relationship. Like, I don't know how you reason your way into a personal relationship with somebody. Isn't a relationship to be personal, it has to be reciprocal? How do you have a reciprocal relationship with a historical document? Like, how does it affect you now to be a believer in Jesus Christ?
Well, it affects me because I believe that he said certain things and did certain things. I believe that he I believe that he died for my sins, and I believe he rose again, and that gives me hope for the resurrection. And he is that on which I stake myself, as Peterson puts it when he talks about staking your life on something.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I believe that God is worthy of worship, and I believe that the sort of crown of that was in God redeeming humanity. because I think we need a savior. I don't think that we can I don't think we can sort ourselves out, because I think we're fallen and broken creatures, and we needed God in His mercy to provide a way for us to have life and to be reconciled.
So this way is a code then? It's or is it a contact? Like,
well, so
do you have a contact with God, or do you have a code of evidence that helps you reconfigure yourself?
Well, I wouldn't claim to have a contact in the way that, God spoke to me the other day. Again, there's a denomination that's into that sort of thing, but I tend to be very cautious of that. So no, I wouldn't say that I receive direct communiques from God, but I think that the cumulative weight of the evidence that I see leads me to conclude that He is real and that He's made Himself known in the world, and that he's done something for me that makes Him worthy of worship. But when you say, it's interesting, you say reason yourself into a personal relationship. I would agree to the extent that you could intellectually be like, yeah, okay, I believe that there's a God, I believe that there's Jesus, but I don't really care. I mean, fine, great, whatever. I don't really want a relationship with that, even though I believe that it's true. So I agree that believing that something is true and believing it in a personal way, like Peterson will talk about what you act out, what you embody, what you stake yourself on. So to that extent, I kind of see the point you're making, and I think I would agree with it to an extent.
So do you act as if God is there, or do you act in relationship to God? So you do not have or claim to have a personal connection or contact with the divine, but you do have a framework in which you situate yourself as though you have a direct connection to God?
Well, I mean, I don't perceive God with my five senses, if that's what you mean by a direct contact. But as I look at the world around me, and as I look at the record of history, I am forced to conclude that He is real, because I think that's where the evidence leads me, and I'm trying to follow the evidence where it leads. And I think that's the rational conclusion at the end, actually. The rational conclusion is that God is literally real. So I wouldn't, if I said I act as if, that would imply, well, I don't really think He's real, but I'm going to sort of pretend He is, because that's better for my life. Sort of like Blaise Pascal saying, well, I mean, come on, take a chance. What can it hurt?
Yeah.
Just in case, right? Just in case belief. I don't really go for that. I think you should believe something because you think it's true. And I guess that's what I would say. I think this is true, and that's why I live my life this way.
Okay, so it does have an effect in your life through your behavior then? Oh,
definitely, yeah.
Okay. Like how? Like you live according to a set of commandments or set of principles, like how Jesus distilled them down to love your God and love your neighbor? That maxim or something?
I mean, I try to. I mean, obviously I'm not not perfect. I can't do that perfectly. But I pray. Like, there's one concrete difference.
Okay.
Peterson will talk about, well, how would your life be any different? Because if you're just trying to be a good person in general, then why would that change anything concrete? But I would say one thing is that I have hope. I have hope in that there is a life after death, and also I have a belief that there is somebody who created me and who knows me, to whom I owe something, and so I live my life in a sense as an act of service to God, not not just as an act of service to my fellow man, but also in recognition of God as the king and as the creator of the universe and of me.
Mm-hmm. And this is just the one place where I kind of leave any given stated faith, because in my experience, there's a direct experience of the divine that is impossible to communicate through language, impossible to rationalize into or out of the status of being true. And no given set of documents can actually lead you to that connection. Like, you have to have you have to be called to that path, or you have to. You have to, like the story of Paul, like going around before he was Paul, he was Saul, right? And he was going around like, I'm going to go kill the Christians,
Yep,
and then Jesus comes and go, pow, like, and then he's like, it totally changes him. And Paul was given a gift that reformulated him around an experience, a personal experience. And that's where I depart. And there's no way around the fact that it cannot be shared directly with anybody else. It's between you and that which created you. But without that experience, I don't know how you would base your religious claims, either religious or a-religious claims, either for or against God. Without that religious experience, any sort of claim is a rationalization. It's still just a reasoned way of entering into a postulated relationship rather than a direct relationship itself with the Creator. Well,
I think we have to be careful to define our terms here. So, how do you define direct, I guess, is what I would be curious to know.
This is so dangerous. This is where I wish I was hiding behind an icon.
I too like to live dangerously.
There's everything that I say is necessarily unverifiable, because I'm reducing it into language that is inaccurate. There's a vibration, a force, there's a light that suffuses reality, there's a love that connects everything, that flows from one thing to another, that's constantly suffusing and sustaining existence, and that human beings can be unaware of that or more aware of that, but they need to go through a path, a journey of being opened and trained by God to become closer to God.
Sounds like the Force. It binds us, it penetrates us, it surrounds us.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure. Well, it has a very impersonal feeling to it, though. So that just sounds like you're kind of, you make the path as you tread it, right? It's some sense, the meaning is what you bring, then you're connected to your fellow man, and that's what unites people, and that you're sort of, you have your ultimate goal, your highest aim, the highest good you can possibly conceive, as Peterson puts it, and that is quote unquote God. In some sense, that's what you're aiming towards.
See, that formula, I have a problem with that formulation, because again, well, there's two things. One, I cannot intend to get close to God. Like, that which is the highest is so far above me that I have no way to bring myself up there. I have no way of ascending myself. My wings do not go that far. So
I can agree with that.
But it is an orientation. There is an orientation toward that which is, that which was, and that which will be, that I can orient myself towards in every given human activity that I do. I believe that I do have the responsibility to form and formulate the meaning that I encounter, and that even you, like, without you going through the work of reasoning this all out, your Christianity, it would not be your Christianity. Like, you've come to it and you've embarked on a journey that makes it part and parcel of who you are. It builds into you and you build into it. So there's a reciprocal relationship with a text and a doctrine that that forms a relationship with reality, or that you name as God.
I would give an example. There's a scientist named Günter Beckley, a German scientist. He didn't grow up in a Christian home. He was just regular atheist background. And he began, in his adult life, he began doing some reading. He began thinking about the way that things have an appearance of design in nature, for example, and he began studying those arguments and thought, these aren't terrible arguments. There's something here. I should look into this more. And gradually, over a period of several years, he realized that, as a good scientist, as someone who looks for the best explanation of all the evidence we see, he could no longer deny that there is a God, and that God seeks a personal relationship, and furthermore, the reality of Jesus. And so he eventually converted to Christianity. And he says, at no point did I have a lightning bolt from the sky or Jesus speaking to me or that kind of experience. I just, over a gradual process, it wasn't immediate, but I decided that rationally that was the best explanation. That's why I'm a Christian now.
Yeah, but do you reason your way into love with somebody? You can reason your way out of it, but do you reason your way into love with somebody? How does a personal relationship result from a rational empirical argument?
Well, think about it this way, and this is obviously not a perfect analogy, but suppose that you were adopted, and you never. You didn't learn anything about your biological parents until you were an adult. And then let's say you discovered that your biological mother had sacrificed a great deal to bring you into the world and to give you up for adoption. Well, and then you discovered that she died of cancer 2 years ago. And so you were never able to have a personal relationship with her. But you feel love for her because you realize what she did for you. And what she gave up for you. And so, I obviously I don't think that's a perfect analogy, because I think that Christ didn't stay at the grave, but I don't think it's hard to imagine learning about a person you've never met and feeling love for that person once you understand what that person has done for you. That person has love for you. So I don't think that's problematic. But again, though, I would agree. I think there is evil in the world as well. There's malevolence, and there will be people who, think about Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, right? And when he sees the sun, he's like, nasty, the nasty yellow face. He hates the light. He hates the light. And I think in that same way, there will be people, malevolent, evil people in this world, who, for them, Christ will be the blinding, burning kind of light that gives them a migraine, because they can't stand it. It shows up all of their ugliness and their darkness and the sin. And so if they saw Christ, it'd be like, yeah, I know who you are and I hate you. I don't want anything to do with you. So
you're now describing Christ as a phenomena, then?
Oh, no. I think I'm using the sun as an analogy. But I believe that Christ is a person. And I think what Tolkien was doing, because Tolkien was a Catholic, I think Tolkien was using Gollum's intense hatred of the light and of the sun as a sort of a metaphor or a way of understanding what it means when we in this life reject God, because God's nature is perfect goodness. And so perfect goodness, it's like Cain and Abel. It's the ideal showing up all of our failures and faults.
Yeah.
And so right, to clarify, I'm not saying that God is purely a phenomenon. I think he's a real person, but I think that this is the kind of effect that God and Christ have on people.
Well, yeah, I'm coming at it in the opposite from the opposite point of view than probably anybody else you're going to argue about this. I'm not an atheist at all. I'm a monotheist and etc. But I just earlier you said that we need more information, we need more revelation.
Well, beyond just like a bare bones first cause argument, yeah, I would agree that alone, that argument by itself won't get you to.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how do I personally talk about revelation. If nobody else is experiencing revelation, people either reason themselves into a relationship with God or reason themselves out of a relationship with God, but nobody's experiencing God as a phenomena, as a phenomenological experience that undergirds every other experience. Then there's no way for me to interact with this conversation. I'm out of this conversation. I've felt out of this conversation for a long time because everybody's arguing ideas. They're not arguing experience. I guess because you fundamentally can't argue experience. But I'm just trying to clarify that when you describe Christ as a phenomena that Gollum has a reaction to, or that we, like Gollum, have a reaction to, the light of God, the light of Christ, or however we individually see that, I pine for people that are looking for that do see it in this present life, not as a historical document or a first order cause, anything impersonal. Like if it's truly personal, then we would have a personal relationship. And the reasoning, rationality is not a personal relationship. That's an abstract relationship.
Well, I think that this is another thing I love about Peterson. Again, even though we disagree, I think he's profoundly right when he talks about how everything you do matters, and how the choices that you make in this world with the people around you form your character. And they shape and mold your future self. So I think that there are decisions we make in this life that move us either closer to who we should be or farther from who we should be. But I think that who we should be is who God created us to be and who God wants us to be. And I think God is the source of good things.
And how do we know that? How do we find that path? Is it all in books? Is it all in the past? Has it all already been written, or is there guidance for me here now?
Well, I think we have our consciences. We have the natural light. You know, when we fail and we mistreat people, that it bothers us because it's like, I shouldn't have done that. I know that was wrong. And so I think that's our moral sense, at work here. And we could choose to live with integrity, or we could choose to rip people off. We could be like Peterson, or we could be like Pangburn, right? So, and these choices, it's like T.S. Eliot writes in his poem Little Gidding, that I'm going to mess this up, but every action, every step is a step to the block or to the fire or down the sea's throat. And that is where we start, And so the question, I think, at the end of the day is are we molding ourselves into the kind of people who when we do encounter Christ, will we want him? Will we want to serve him? Because I don't think you can ultimately have the good, right? Because Peterson's always talking about the good. I think because the good flows from God, from Christ. I think in the end you can't be united with that without being united with the person of God, with the person of Christ.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't see heaven as being like a sit-down restaurant where you say, yeah, hi, I'd like my own personal spa, and my cat died, I'd like to have my cat, that would be good. Hold the God, though. I don't really need that. I'll just be good with my happy hunting grounds. Mm-hmm. Heaven doesn't work that way. That's a fake, Thomas Kincaid version of heaven. And on the flip side, I think that people have an immature view of hell,
I had something. I thought you were going to finish a sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, please.
I had something, but it just slipped me. It's there's a very strong evolutionary or Darwinian explanation for the conscience, and that the conscience masks itself as righteous when in fact it's just a high order selfishness. Like, I need to be very aware of the reciprocity in my social circle in order for me to function within a social circle. And there's a lot of arguments that I can't remember or really get into, but if I act in good faith, if everybody in the system is acting in good faith with everybody else, and we all have reputations that we have to watch, then that makes that a society can form very strongly, or very complex society can form when there's personal responsibility. And morality is a codification of certain behaviors that if you adhere to, then the society itself will function at a higher and higher order. It's not necessarily some sort of divine goodness that you're going for. It's actually a very practical, pragmatic way that human beings as social animals have evolved through just by brunt force of natural selection.
Sure. So, I mean, that's kind of the way that Peterson goes with, he'll talk about Jean Piaget, game theory, and how
game theory,
morality evolves as a process of imitation and imitating the ideal and that kind of thing. I think that begs the question, though, in the philosophical sense of begging the question, that I think there's presuppositions baked into that.
Such as what?
Well, that the evolutionary paradigm is the paradigm for everything. That's the paradigm that can explain all of this. And I in the end, I don't think that has the necessary explanatory power.
It's really fucking hard to argue with once you really get into it. Like, it really is one of the sharpest tools in the toolbox that you can't really get around. Basically, you set up different variations of a behavior, let's say, and the strongest behavior is going to survive and outmode and adapt itself to keep on surviving. And so I don't think that we can get away with that sort of breakdown, even though I don't completely exist within an evolutionary framework myself. I do pine for something beyond the evolutionary framework, but it's so good at explaining how everything got to where it is right now and how everything can develop into the future, that I haven't seen anybody actually get into the nitty-gritty and show me where it's wrong or where it doesn't actually adhere to human experience.
Well, but I think it's a naturalistic framework, right? It's that we can explain everything that we see purely in naturalist or scientific terms. Again, that nature is a closed system. Nature is the whole show, right? And it's just people interacting within that closed system. Someone's called it the iron box of naturalism, I think. And I understand why people gravitate, why people have that sense. But I would highly recommend a little book by C.S. Lewis called Miracles, which a lot of people have been getting into. Jordan Peterson have also been getting into C.S. Lewis, which is cool, I think, because Lewis went on a similar sort of journey to what Peterson is going on now, I think. And the book Miracles, it's not like a heavy-handed apologetic text. He just says, look, let's just sort of think through carefully, being precise in our speech. Let's think about whether it's actually rational to think that nature is the whole show. And he's not trying to get you to a come to Jesus moment. He's not going to shove a tract in your hand, right? Or, but he's saying, so let's think about mind, for example, about reason. Can we explain reason? Can we explain mind by purely, just matter in motion, natural causes? And he makes the argument that our minds and our reason are sort of like glasses, so or like looking through a window, and someone says, "Oh, you're looking through a window." No, I'm not looking through a window. Yeah, you are. Or I'm not looking through glasses. Well, you have them on your face all the time, and so you forget that you're wearing them, and so then you might think that they're not there. And he said our reason is sort of like that, and that it's really tough to explain that in purely materialistic terms, and so I think that once you crack the door open to naturalism being false, then you know the whole new world of potential explanations opens up to you, besides the evolutionary paradigm.
But what are those potential explanations built on? Direct experience, or strict scriptural or doctrinal principles? Like, what are of course there's a billion different reasons that you could plaster at anything. I'm still not convinced that reason is the path either towards or away from a divine revelation or divine experience or a divine relationship or divine resonance or whatever we want to call it. But
well, I mean, I suppose my question would be, so your frustration or your difficulty, do you think it's possible that we could come to the conclusion that the existence of God is more likely than not, is quite probable enough that we could say confidently that God exists?
But what does that do? What does that, in the end, how does a conclusion, how does a rational, languaged, logical argument do anything for your soul? How does that do anything for your life? Like unless you use that to pin a whole bunch of other things on, like that's not what's going to get you into heaven. That's not what is going to show you God. You're not going to get to God through your brain.
Well, I think we get to God through Jesus, but I mean, you know, Jesus said a lot of specific stuff about himself in the New Testament. You know, I mean, he was not a shy guy. You know, he walked around saying.
Well, but he was still a trickster, though. He was still pretty tricksy. Like he told parables. Like he.
Oh, sure.
Playing with language.
Yeah, but my point is that he wasn't. He said clearly, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what prophecies have said about me. This is why I'm here. All right, I did that now, and now, here I am. Like I've risen again. This is what this means. You know, this is who I am. And so, if I believe that's true, that actually split the timeline in real life, then that's an anchor. That's a historical anchor. And that sets Christianity apart from, you know, Hinduism, Buddhism, which are just like, oh, well, this is just like a path you could follow. You know, it's just a way of life. Christianity puts itself on a limb and makes highly specific, tied down claims about things that actually happened. Like, no, God actually came to the pale blue dot, you know, at this point in space-time and explicitly said this stuff about himself and did these things. And this is what we can grasp, you know. So I agree that if God had, you know, stayed in the sort of this vague deistic heaven and hadn't actually come down and concretely communicated with people, that would be a very difficult God to get any kind of a handle on or to love or worship. But it's because I believe that God did come down into the nitty gritty, and he hasn't done so with me right now. Like he hasn't spoken to me audibly, but there were people with whom he did, and I, you know, by cumulative case, I have reason to trust that they were in good faith when they wrote this down and that they weren't lying or deluded, and so. That's what I go back to, is that tie down, you know, that anchor.
It's not, I'm just in a weird spot because that's not radical enough for me. It's not enough for me that other people in other times had these experiences and wrote down these words. And it's great. And I totally appreciate that has happened before me, but I want something here and now, because and it can't be something that I think, and it can't be something that I believe, because my capacity for belief is too frail. My capacity to reason is too frail and too fraught and too, I hide things from myself all the time. I believe in things that don't exist. I think about things that aren't true, and so I don't trust my organ. I don't trust these glasses of belief on one hand and reason on the other to get me any further than to pragmatically figure out how to exist here and now. Like, those tools are for here and now. But I believe, or have the orientation and then a feedback loop that gives me more than just hope, but like experience of something beyond this life, or something behind or underneath this life. And there's no way that I can actually communicate that with the tools that religion has offered, except for certain strands of mysticism, basically mystic traditions through various mostly monotheistic traditions. They're the closest I've come.
Well, I mean, so this is just where it's getting good, So, I mean, I would agree. Lots of people have said lots of stuff and written down lots of nice things, and oh, this wonderful thing happened to me. And it's like, well, yay for you. It's not. Yeah. I'm not feeling it. Sure. I do think, though, that the particular experiences that we find in the New Testament, and the particular message that these disciples had, is unique. I don't think it's just another mystical experience that somebody had.
What makes it unique then?
Oh, a lot of things.
And what makes it so unique that it stands in the way of me ever attaining it myself? That I have to rely on these guys who aren't around anymore to get close to God, who created me.
Well, I think that the experiences are they're unique in a lot of ways. So in the sense that I can't come up with a good natural explanation for the things that they were saying and the things that they were reporting, besides that a man literally died and rose again from the dead. To me, when I weigh up the evidence, that it seems like that's literally what happened. And so if I believe that that's a thing that happened in history, that Jesus actually rose from the dead, that's seismic. That's huge.
Yeah, but that was 2,000 years ago. Almost to the day now. We're getting close.
Well, yeah, but when you put that together with, okay, so just to clarify where you're going, you're saying, okay, suppose I believe that. Suppose I accept that that there was a guy who came down and died and rose from the dead. Yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Even if that were true, what does that mean? Okay, so that's a good question, and I think to that you have to say, well, what else do we know about this dude? Like, what did he say about himself? Who did he say that he was? Oh, that's weird. He said that he was equal with God to a bunch of Jews for whom that would have been the most blasphemous thing you could possibly say. So it's not like he had anything to get out of this. I mean, it wasn't like Muhammad saying, "Hey, I have a great idea. Free sex and conquests for everyone. Let's go do this." Now, that's a smart leader, right? That's somebody who knew exactly what he wanted and went for it. That was Muhammad. That was not Jesus, though. So you have to. I think the question you have to ask is, who was Jesus? And what did he say about himself? And what did he say was the significance of the things that were going to happen to him, the things that did happen to him? And so, if a man tells me that he's God, I might think he's crazy at first because I don't know anything else about him. So that seems like a good bet. You're crazy, or you're lying, or something's wrong here. Mm-hmm. Okay. But then he makes specific predictions. I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch this. This will be good. The predictions come true. Okay, now I'm getting a little freaked out. He rises from the dead. Now I'm really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And so he put this all together, and he said, this is what this means. It means I have power over death. It means that death does not have a hold on me. And this means that I am God, and I love human beings, and I see that human beings are broken, but I'm coming to restore that, and I'm coming to bring healing. And
eventually,
I'm here to,
or now?
Eventually, I've heard claims that there are miraculous healings in places like Africa or whatnot, and I mean,
I don't really care about the physical medical healings. I'm talking about, like, if we're broken in spirit.
Yes, I think we are.
And if I'm not going to be fixed in spirit until after I die, and I have certain words in my mouth and my brain, and then I get fixed in the end, that doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me, even if God, let's just take all the claims that that are true. It's still me and my capacity of experience that I'm hinging my entire eventual fixedness on. Like, I want to be fixed now. I want to go through the process now while I'm alive with my volition to experiment with things and to mess up, and then to get taught lessons and to find guidance and to build something out of myself. I don't want to just put it all on hold because of a bunch of claims, whether they're true or not.
Well, I mean, I agree. It's not like a one and done thing. I mean, I think it's a really shallow view. There's this view of salvation. Oh, you have the date in your Bible, and you prayed and you were saved. Boom, done. And that's like it. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that. That's a silly view of salvation. I think, actually, again, going back to Peterson, I think this could be united with what he says about the formation of character. I think, in some sense, salvation is a process. It's a string of choices that you make to follow the good, and to choose good, but to choose God. And I think that that's the nature of God, is the good. And so I think that healing of our sinfulness is an ongoing process of repentance. Repentance is important too, so you can't just say, well, I went to confession, so I'm good. I can go do whatever I want now, and I'll be cool with Jesus at the end. No, you have to repent. You have to take ownership of what you've done and take responsibility, and recognize that you've twisted the fabric of reality, as Peterson says. So I completely agree with you that fixing, quote unquote, it's not like a one and done thing. It could be a long, sometimes a painful, lifelong process of failing and repenting and failing and repenting, but always trying to be good, always desiring what is good. And then in the end, I think that after death, we will be changed. We will be restored, so that we won't have to fight anymore. We won't have to struggle against who we are. And
I can't see that far. But there is the atheist argument that they don't need all these claims about God to live a good life. That if that works for you, fine. That if that works for you, if all these stories and doctrines work for you to live a good life and embark on the project, which is the most fulfilling project, refining yourself and becoming more and more a master of your passions and more attuned with reality, or whatever you want to call it, they will say that I don't need that. I don't need all these claims. I can just go straight to the meat of the matter. I don't need the scaffolding or these training wheels to get me to be a better person.
Well, I would agree with that to a certain extent. I think we all have a moral compass. We all can sense when we're doing things we're not supposed to do, when we're not doing things that we should be doing. So I would completely agree that an atheist could act with integrity in his life and in his work and all that sort of thing. I think that we could perceive that by the natural light, But in the end, I think what's missing, though, is that we need to be forgiven. We need to be forgiven for the wrong that we do, and
Why? If I wasn't in control of myself and then I realized why do I need to be forgiven for something that I didn't even know I was doing wrong? Like, why does forgiveness, if I just simply evaluate my behavior and adapt my behavior, what does forgiveness add that, other than just a bunch of psychological weight to that process of getting better?
Well, I mean forgiveness for things that you did know you did that were wrong.
Forgiveness to who, though? To the people that I've wronged? Then I should ask their forgiveness. Why do I need an overarching preternatural forgiveness from an entity that I can only have a indirect relationship with anyways? Like, what does that forgiveness add to that?
Well, because I think that when we do wrong and when we hurt other people,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's only a wrong done to those people. I think that it's also it's also an act of rebellion against God, because God put those people in our lives. He created them, and He created us. And so then when we hurt them, we're hurting people that He loves and that He's created. And so that's a wrong to Him as well as to them. And so so that needs to be there. Justice has to be done. There has to be a just punishment for that wrong. And I don't think we're able to expiate it. Have you read the play Macbeth?
I watched the film, but
yeah. Do you remember the scene? Very famous scene where Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking around, and she keeps like washing her hands over and over again. And she's like, out, damned spot, and she can't do it. It's like she keeps trying it. It's like it's not coming out. It's not washing clean. And I think that's how it is with us. We try to make things up, but sometimes you can't go back. Maybe you hurt somebody in high school, and then you try to go back and reconnect with that person and say you're sorry, and you can't, and it just doesn't work out. You can't make amends. You can't atone. And I think there's something in human nature that cries out to be forgiven, for atonement. And it's like, I don't know how to do this on my own. But then I think that's what the gospel is, that the Christian gospel is, that that God in His mercy says, I know you can't. And so that's why I've made a way.
So this seems like one way in which the Creator interacts with you in your daily actual life. Like, not through a historical document, not through a system of rationalized doctrine, but through a direct expiation or an atonement. And you receive that through your faith.
Oh, well, yeah. And I would never say that this is like, yeah, I mean, I want to be clear here. I come to my belief in God because I think that God best explains everything that I see. But once I believe in God, that has major ramifications for my life. And it's not like if I read a math textbook, great, okay, I have all this mathematical knowledge, but it only affects me in a very narrow, limited way. But this kind of knowledge of a God who created me and loved me and has forgiven my sins is personal. It's uncomfortable, but it's very personal.
Why do you say uncomfortable? What's uncomfortable about it?
Well, I mean, nobody likes to feel as if they owe something to someone. I mean, that could be hard to admit. Because and I'm a selfish person. I struggle with pride and with my selfish nature, with wanting what I want right now, what's best for me. And so, but if I believe in God, that means that I have to have a certain amount of trust, and it means that I have to submit. I think about Peterson's dream of like all the kings of the world rising up out of their graves and bowing to Christ. And the way that Peterson read that dream was that even the most tyrannical king must have someone to whom he bends the knee, but Peterson hesitates to move beyond the phenomenological and say that that's a literal person. But that's a profound truth. And then I think that profound truth is made explicit. It is made real in Christ. It's like C.S. Lewis says, Christ is the story of Christ. The Christian story is the true myth. It's the myth that literally actually happened here and now. It wasn't just an idea in the mind of man,
Well, I'm trying to chase down where exactly in your life it actually affects you. It orients you, it organizes your consciousness. It orients you towards the good.
Yes.
And it seemed like you were on the verge of like having a personal, like it intersects with you on a personal level through forgiveness, through the recognition of your nature, and then a transcendence of that nature, or a washing of the stains that have accumulated to you by dint of your imperfect nature.
Oh, yes, right. Absolutely. That I believe that's possible, that's even a thing that I could do, that I'm able to repent and be forgiven of the things that I've done wrong. That's right. That's a big way that it affects me. So I think the two key things that Peterson is still wrestling with, that he's missing by staying at the purely phenomenological, that's one, atonement, that the process of being forgiven and of having atonement for things you've done that you can't expiate on your own. But also resurrection, which I've been discussing before. So, I mean, like, what do you say to a parent who lost a kid? Well, I mean, if this is all that there is, that they don't have a hope, to cling to. And I've known of families, Christian families, who lost a child, and they'll say that's what's been keeping us going, is the conviction that this didn't end her existence, that she literally exists, and that we will be able to embrace her someday.
Yeah, but that might just be a useful fantasy. That might just be like a evolutionary behavior, an adaptation, to call it.
Well, wishing don't make it so. I agree. You can't you can't say, well, I really, really want this thing to be true, therefore it's true. Clearly, that's fallacious. Yeah,
it's very useful though, especially if it's ameliorating a hecton of despair from your life, or allowing you to go through the process of healing. If you postulate that eventually the baby and I will be conjoined in a heavenly afterfield, that would help you get through the devastating here and now of crushing despair. I don't know. That way of justifying redemption, or the idea of redemption, it's still, again, it's not radical enough. Like, I want to be alive in my life. I want to not be dead. I've been dead before. I've been the Walking Dead. I've been an undead thing. And what brings me to life, what makes me aware again of the beauty of the world, of the responsibility I have of being engaged with the world, is through some sort of transcendental contact. I don't.
Well,
it's a direct reality for me. Redemption, resurrection is an actual process of becoming more alive in my life, not necessarily after I die, but like going from a state of deadness to.
Well, here's a question. When you, and I apologize, this is really interesting. I know we're going on here, but isn't there a sort of instinct when you feel alive in the world, and you're in nature, say, and you're really connected with the beauty of nature, and you're in touch with your body, and you're in community with people? Isn't there an instinctive sense of wanting to be thankful to whoever or whatever made all this possible? Don't you kind of want to thank somebody for that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, So I mean, yeah, kind of like if your mom makes your favorite dish for you, and right, and you thank your mom, right?
Yeah.
So
But I don't personally think that when everybody has that experience of being aware of how blessed they are, or how blessed they are with existence, by going through states of being less blessed and then going however you come to the realization that you're blessed, I don't necessarily think that the Christian framework is any more apt a rubric in which to put one's thankfulness. I think that's why I just collapse it down to monotheism. It's just like there's that which is, and everybody is going to be from another some culture or some particular, even every Christian is going to have a different version of Christ in their head, right? I don't need that framework in order to, furthermore, I don't expect everybody else to have the same framework in which I put my thankfulness of being aware of that. Though I still think that monotheism is the cleanest way of organizing that in my mind. I don't need to call it Jesus, even though sometimes I do.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I guess I would say that I want to know what's true, and I want to know who Jesus actually was. But
you also think that Jesus is, like, why don't, like that's the thing. That's why I want to push against you, is that it's just not radical enough. Like, don't you want to know who Jesus is, and how do you know who Jesus is?
Absolutely, right. No, yeah, and I didn't mean to exclude that.
Yeah, I was kind of being pedantic, but
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but I'm saying, suppose that I'm coming at this. Suppose I don't believe this yet. I'm coming at this from outside the framework. Yeah. These are the questions I think you have to ask in the pursuit of what's true. So, if as I look at the world around me, it's like, okay, where do I send the check, so to speak? Like, who do I have to thank for all this? And do I have reason to believe that there's a personal God who created this and who actually gives a rip about me personally?
Yeah, but does he give a rip about, like, what you call him? Like, does it specifically, do you have to call him Christ, or imagine that he, or not imagine, but in the strong sense of believe that he existed in a historical way? Do you have to go through all that leaps? Can't you just have a direct relationship without all those words, without all that thinking, without all that doctrine, without all that reason? Can you not just yield the fruits, like Abel did, just render the best unto him and not have to stipulate any other characteristics to God?
Well, I mean, not to be pedantic, but I think Abel had as much of a relationship with God as he was given, as he was able to.
Aquinas or St. Augustine.
Well, no, I mean, Abel. I mean, if we're thinking Abel, that's pre.
Yeah, like, I'm saying like he had no less nor more relationship with God than Christian thinkers. I was just extending your analogy.
Well, so I think there's a difference between people before Jesus who, like, all that they knew was the monotheistic God of the Jews. So, but that was all that the light that they had been given. I think there's a difference between people in that historical context and people like us who now we have the New Testament. Now we've got all this information. We have this person, Jesus, who is sort of presented to us as a challenge, I think. Like, what do you do with this guy? Who is this? So, I mean, to answer your question, I would say I do think that Jesus is, ultimately, he is the only way to God, because he said he was, and then he did things that convinced me that I should listen to him when he said these things. It wasn't just talk. It was talk backed by action. And so this seems to be the message that God has given to us. And so I think we have to follow that. We have to follow the evidence where it leads. We have to follow truth. And so, yeah, I mean, now that, again, though, that doesn't mean that I believe somebody on a distant island who's cut off from Christendom and Western civilization is like, well, sucks for him. I guess he's just going to hell or whatever because he never heard of Jesus. I don't believe that at all. But I think like eventually, one way or the other, we will have to decide what to do with Jesus, I guess, is a kind of a pithy way to put it.
I wonder if I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to wrap up.
Sure.
Soon.
Yeah, I totally fine.
After work, but I wonder if there, just as Peterson is kind of a gateway for people to a renewed interest in Christianity, people who are secular, who grew up in a version of Christianity that didn't really resonate with them, through Peterson's work, it begins to resonate with them. I wonder if there won't be also a gateway of Peterson of Christians going into a broader conception or more syncretic. There's a word.
Syncretistic?
Syncretistic relationship with religion itself. If there will be Christians who say, "Oh yeah, like now I understand how I can make sense of other religions and not necessarily have to say that mine's better than theirs," but like they're all speaking a certain sort of language that it's talking about deeper truths about reality, and now I can go and be one, and I can form brotherhood with people of different faiths and different cultures.
I mean,
the Jungian tools that Peterson's bringing to the table.
Yeah, I mean that could happen. I'll just say I haven't really heard of that. Everything that I've been hearing is very much going the other way. And I mean, maybe this would be a nice place to end. But I got a neat message from a guy who he grew up in the church, and then he just kind of didn't think there was good reasons for it and left in college, I think. He got into some substance abuse and really not great stuff. And so then Peterson helped him put his life together, and then also sparked a renewed interest in religion and in Christianity. And so what this guy said was that at a certain point, though, as he listened to Peterson, he felt like there was a certain amount of diminishing returns, because he's like, okay, we're carrying our cross up this hill. What's at the top of the hill? I mean, like, where's this all going? I mean, this is great, but I'm not sure what this is pointing to, like what this is tending towards.
And we know it's not the alt-right. So
yes, I think we could safely say it's not the alt-right. Yes. But anyway, so this guy said, I began having another look at bona fide Christianity, and it suddenly began making a lot more sense, and it began clicking, and so now he calls himself a Christian, and he had some other he had a personal experience of feeling like he no longer had a desire to abuse substances, which I can't say where that comes from. It may be that God gave him that as a gift, but it could also be natural. But through a combination of things, that's where he is now. But I thought that was a great illustration of the kind of path I think a lot of people are taking and will continue to take. So maybe you're right that that's something that could happen. I'm just saying that I haven't particularly seen that. I think the Christians I've seen who actually interact with Peterson, as opposed to the Christians who just kind of see him in the distance, they're like, oh yeah, that's a thing, that they ignore him and move on. The Christians who actually engage with him are not like shifted from their view, but they're hopeful and intrigued that over time he'll learn more about the Christian view.
Isn't that how you wrap up your article about the Peterson-Harris debates that you published this summer, where you say that there's a lot of work for Christians to do to take Peterson as a writing prompt and move forward?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, unfortunately, we didn't have time to get into this, but there's a lot of things that I think the church has not done very well that I think we could learn from Peterson. The feminizing of church is a big problem. I don't think it's been great for men in that sense. It's off-putting to men in some ways. But yeah, the way I put it, as I said, that Jordan Peterson has set the ball in a way, and that the church has to spike it. We have to come along and say, okay, well, here's our justification. Here's why we don't think that Peterson actually can get you as far as you need to go. Here's what we think is at the top of the hill. Here's where this is all tending. This is what it means. Augustine said our hearts are restless. until they find their rest in thee, speaking of God. So that's the hope. I think that's the rest for restless humanity.